From the grind to the glory, one man's journey proves that heart, hustle, and determination change the game. This is Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., where adversity is met head-on and champions are made. Here's George.
Welcome to Catch as Catch Can. I'm George Tinsley Sr., former professional athlete, entrepreneur, author, and your host. This is a space where we sit down with leaders who face real challenges, learned real lessons, and kept moving forward. Joining me today is Coach Gary Downs Jr., a former NFL running back, longtime coach, and leader who spent decades developing athletes and people at every level. He serves as CEO of the Trust Downs Foundation, represents the Fellowships of Christian Athletes in Gwinnett County, and co-hosts the Downs to Business podcast. He also is the proud father of two standout leaders, Caleb Downs, a football All-American and Forbes 30 and under 30 honoree, and Josh Downs, a wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. Coach Gary, welcome.
Excited to be here.
Well, Coach, we're glad to have you. Would you prefer to be called Coach or Gary?
You can call me Gary.
Call you Gary. Okay. All right, young man. We're glad to have you. And looking at a little bit of your story, I think this is going to be an exciting hearing for our guests out there. This is a live show, and people will dial directly in and to hear all the key things that you have to say. So I like to start off, Gary, by looking back and trying to get a sense of where your life as a former professional athlete, as an athlete going into the pros and life going into where you are today, kind of where that all got started back in your early childhood. Can you give us a little insight there?
Yeah, I was born in a small town in North Carolina called New Bern. My mother and father got married at a very early age, and my dad joined the military. So being from North Carolina, we moved to Seattle, Washington, moved from there to Heidelberg, Germany, and moved from there to Indianapolis, Indiana, and finally settled during my high school years in Columbus, Georgia. So you think about growing up in the South, like most kids do down here, I grew up around the world. So that change, that military upbringing sort of marked and molded me. And a couple of things were consistent in that childhood, obviously my parents and siblings, but sports and faith in God. My mother made sure she took us to church and developed our faith. And then our father in the military, we had discipline when we had sports. So those experiences moving around the country, around the world, shaped me. And high school, played football, baseball, basketball, ran track, ended up getting a scholarship in football to Georgia, South Carolina, Indiana. I ended up settling on and going to NC State. I also wanted to be an Olympic track athlete. So football and track were very important to me athletically. And then academically, I was an honor roll student, merit scholar here in Georgia. And so I was I was well-rounded, sort of a young man, a Renaissance young man, even at a young age.
Well, that sounds like outstanding background. As you were growing up, you indicated you participated in all sports. Now, was that as you traveled around with your family, or was that once you got into middle school, high school? Where did that first kick in?
Well, my dad was my first coach. So when I was little league, about, let's say, 6 years old, my dad coached me baseball. Baseball was his sport. He loved to talk about the Negro League baseball and Satchel Paige. I've got a big lithograph that's limited edition. I got a book about the Negro Leagues because that's where he grew up at and wanted to be a pro baseball player. So he was my first baseball coach, taught me a practice method. You know, if you want to be good at anything, you got to practice. We would practice with a team, but he would set me aside. We'd have practices alone, bags of balls. So I learned if you want to achieve anything, you got to work hard. And he was all about Charlie Hustle, outworking the next person. But sports, back then there was no AAU. There was no travel ball. It was basically playing in your rec league we had a travel baseball team in our town, but it was no travel ball. So you're playing a league team, middle school, and then your high school. And that was the pattern that I never went to I went to one camp it was a middle school basketball camp. I won a dunk contest in the 7th grade, and I got to attend a basketball camp at Lawrence North High School. And I remember meeting Clark Kellogg during that basketball camp. But yeah, we weren't travel ball back then. It was just playing on the local team, the rec team, or your high school team.
Gary, got to ask you, you said you won a dunk contest?
Yeah, no, I was a 7th grader. I could put my hand pretty good over the rim, but they lowered it for the dunk contest for 7th graders, and I won that. But I played, listen, when I was in middle school, I played with a couple guys that ended up playing pro ball. A guy named Eric Montross, who played for University of North Carolina, played in the NBA for a while. He was on the 8th grade team when I was 7th grade, and there was a bunch of other guys that went on and played pro and college ball for basketball, but I won the dunk contest.
Yeah, that's some outstanding hops, man, for the seventh grader, and even lowering the basket down. I'm not going to ask you how far down it was, but even lowering it down. You know, today's athletes participate more in one sport versus multiple sports. How do you feel that at that early age that participating in each one of those sports helped you as you decided to pursue football?
Well, you know, when you play baseball, you got hand-eye coordination. And then, of course, sitting on that mound, having a pitch, that develops a lot of poise. And being at that plate by yourself is a lot of poise, but also learn to sacrifice and patience, because baseball doesn't always have action. You're sitting out there in the outfield or something waiting. And then, of course, basketball, you get a little more cardio coordination, more plays, and you're more like, you know, obviously working in tandem with other people on offense and defense. In football, you learn a lot of toughness. You play in cold weather. And so those sports, and then track, a lot of endurance and sprinting and stuff like that. So I think each sport, even wrestling, I wrestled for a year. So I believe that each sport adds something to you. I played soccer. The endurance required for soccer and the footwork, I believe those are foundational things, even like doing tumbling and gymnastics. There was no specialization back then. Unless you played golf or tennis, those are only athletes that specialize at a young age. I believe when kids get to be 10th, 11th grade, maybe at that point they can specialize in basketball or football. But I believe once they're in youth, elementary, middle school, they should play all sports. And as it becomes clear. Like I said, I'll be a track star. And as I started matriculating through high school, I realized my ticket was not going to be basketball. It was going to be football or track. Matter of fact, that was my plan. My senior year of high school, my plan was I'm going to play football and I'm going to get a scholarship. But if I didn't get a scholarship, I was not going to play basketball my senior year and instead just focus on track and get one in that. So I think parents nowadays focus a little too soon because, yes, you want the high level of skill, but not getting the rest, doing one repetitive exercise, you get burnt out physically and mentally, and you don't necessarily create the toughness or the other skill sets that you get from other sports.
You mentioned one key thing there. Do you think today that it's parents versus the actual athlete themselves choosing what's going on?
I think it's a combination. Athletes see other athletes focusing in. They find out their friend quit the basketball team to just play football or quit the baseball team because you have a lot of athletes. You know, I'm not playing baseball anymore. I want to focus on just football. I'm doing 7-on-7. So in the fall, they do football. In the spring, they do 7-on-7. They don't run track. So the parents, kids see that. And then the parents are hearing stories. They're reading books like by Malcolm Gladwell about 10,000 hours. And they're realizing, wait a minute, for my kid to be elite, he's going to have to put 10,000 hours. You do the math. That's like 3 hours a day, 5-6 days a week for like 10 years to get to the 10,000 hours. So when a kid is about 7 years old, you say, well, for my kid to be an elite, world-class, top 100 in the country golfer, he's going to have to focus on golf 3 or 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for 10 years. And maybe when he's 17 years old, he could be ready to go on the PGA or something like that. And I think the combination of what parents are hearing, stories about whether it's Tiger Woods or stories about Kobe Bryant and other athletes, then they hear those stories and they want success. And then there's the burnout stories like Todd Marinovich, where his dad had him strictly in football, specialized diet, no Coca-Cola, no offense to Pepsi, nothing like that. And then he burns out and he's not well-rounded as a person. So I think parents need to grab other sources and look at more than one proof and concept.
Mm-hmm. You don't think or do you think the money enters into that thought process at any?
Money can enter into obviously in the conversation for the athlete later in high school, but also for a parent. I can remember going through this conversation with my wife about our kids. Josh and Caleb played football, baseball, basketball, and ran track. And it's costly. Each of those events might cost anywhere from $500 to $1,500 to join the team, pay for uniform, not including their travel or your travel. And if you're talking about a travel soccer team or baseball team, you might be paying for the coach to travel. And so it's just costly to be able to afford to put a kid in a travel team. And a lot of elite kids play on travel teams. So imagine if your kid's playing football in the fall, then he does some football camps, then he goes to basketball, plays on a middle school team, then plays on AAU. The middle school team has dues, then the AAU team has dues of $1,200. Then turn around in the summer, they got basketball, and they say, playing baseball might cost $800 to be on a club team. So it gets costly. Not everybody can afford it, but as far as actual revenue for the player, that doesn't come into a factor till a kid is in his junior or senior year. You do have kids nowadays that are supposed to be juniors, be 28 kids, but they find out if I reclass up, I can make some money a year early. And some of that comes from the university. University saying, hey, young man, I know you got another year of high school, but if you come down and reclass, graduate early, you can start getting paid. And you do have that pressure, and it depends on the family's economic situation, whether they need that. If they need it, then that adds pressure. They don't need the money right now. They can wait. Or if they say, we're going to sacrifice and wait for our kid to go through and experience the full high school experience, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I was asking those questions, I was kind of referring to what today's athlete is facing versus back when you were coming along, or even going back as far as back in my day as we come along. Today, there's so many financial measures that are out there. Yeah, that makes it crazy. Are you coaching presently today?
I'm coaching over at Collins Hill High School. I'm coaching track. As much as I coach football, I also coach track. And most springs, if I can get out there and volunteer as a track coach, I do believe, like years ago in the NFL, the salaries were not public knowledge. Nobody knew what anybody made. Now it's public knowledge. Everybody knows what the athletes are making, and the salaries have grown exponentially in football and basketball and baseball and soccer, or even in golf. You think about Tiger Woods in golf. Years ago, pro golf was a joke. I remember reading a story about pro tennis. It was all about the amateur. But then when pro tennis changed during that Stan Smith era, and golf, the paydays for golf have gone through the roof. So now you do have people say, you know what, my kid can be a pro golfer and make that money, and that will sustain him and grow business, versus like Bobby Jones. He played pro golf, retired, became a lawyer and an architect. Back then, that's what they did. Nowadays, when you guys have making life-changing and legacy-changing money, then I understand why a parent would be motivated and a kid be motivated to specialize.
Yeah, the NIL situation is reaching in some high schools, and let alone colleges and middle, even junior colleges. That NIL money's out there, which tends to sway a young man, young lady from going in one particular direction versus multiple sports, as you participated yourself and had your children participating in. That's where I was kind of referring to that, wondering if that has entered into some of the athletes that you're dealing with today.
Yeah, so NIL dropped in 2021. During 2021 college season, the portal opened, allowing players to move indiscriminately versus moving once and having to sit out. And then what they call cost of attendance, which paid players $500 to $1,000 a month, and then NIL, name, image, and likeness, plus what you call the collectives, which is part of name, image, and likeness. That's basically boosters start an LLC and giving money to players. And then what you have now is revenue sharing, where a school like Georgia or Alabama could have upward of $20 million, take $14 million. Let's say, for example, football. The football team now has $14 million from their TV contract to spread among their football players, however they see fit, not evenly. And then you couple that with the collectives and marketing. And of course, marketing, only a select group of players on each team get marketing money. The true NIL uses to quarterbacks, wide receivers, sometimes people that touch the ball. Rarely do you have defensive players, but defensive players can make money. And that is an incentive. When you find out, like last year, USC, they started paying high school players that committed to them to, if you commit to USC, then they'll start paying you NIL while you're in high school. So that incentivized high school players to commit early to USC because they could get on the payroll before they left high school. So you have all kinds of things like that. And you have state legislators passing rules at state level, like saying that a player that commits to their state won't be taxed, no state income tax on those things. So there is a lot of incentive. The NIL has reached to the high school level for elite players, mostly 5 stars.
Correct. Yes. And it just seems like you have a great insight on the program that's out there. I noticed that Indiana this year going 16-0, and with the support that they have, Mark Cuban and so forth. What do you see happening in sports today in college? And one other part I'd like you to tell us about also, that is that some kids have as many as 7 years to play.
Yes, typically you have 5 years to play 4, and one of those 5 being a red shirt. But as players get injured, they sometimes get medical red shirts. During a typical red shirt year, you can play 4 games in football, and then after that, they red shirt you, but you can play in the playoffs. But now players are realizing, you know what? If my prospects are to going into NFL, per se, are not to be a first rounder, let's say I was going to be a late round pick, but I can stay in college and make $1 million. You think about a lot of quarterbacks, they're not going to make it in the league. They might get drafted in the late, and they might be a free agent. But if I can stay in college and make $1 million plus a year, why not? And so you do have players fighting for 6th and 7th year. COVID created a issue during 2020. That year didn't count in eligibility. So we do have players that played this year that are in their 6th year because the COVID year did not count. They might have redshirted in 21, might have got an injury in 22, and then they played 23, 24, 25, and now they're going to play 26. We will have some COVID kids this year, and the 2026 season will be in their 7th year because of COVID and injuries, but there is a financial incentive to stay in college. This year, you have the least number of underclassmen declaring for the NFL draft, and that's based off, you know what? Why would I declare when only about 30% of those who declare early make it past year 3? I can stay in college and get paid $750,000. Even if I'm a defensive back or a linebacker, I can stay in college, make that, let's say, guaranteed money. Because once the college signs on it, you stay there, whether you play or not, you're going to make that guaranteed money. And then postpone the NFL to when I have to go. And then when I go, maybe I'm more mature, maybe my body's ready. But a lot of guys know, look, you look at the data, you go to the league. If you get drafted, you make that, be there that first year. But the average span is 3 years for a player. And the higher you get drafted, the more likely you can stay longer and get a second contract. Because in the NFL, NBA, particularly the NFL, the goal is to get to the second contract. The first contract, unless you're a top 20 pick, is not life-changing money because it's gonna run out. But those guys, if you're not going to get drafted in the top 20, if you can go to college, get a guaranteed check. You look at the guy from Duke. I mean, think about that. I mean, if he was drafted, I don't know what his draft rank, unless he's a 4th or 5th rounder, but staying in college, making $2 million a year is a wise decision. Stay in college. You look at Dante Moore from Oregon. He could have came out and probably been a 2nd pick in the draft, and he would have made $50 million over the next 4 or 5 years. But he could stay at Oregon and make $5 or $6 million in the year, and then come out next year, be more mature, and hopefully that will help his long term. But it's hard to turn down $5 million guaranteed when it's going to go to your development. So
yeah, and it's still true, Gary, that in football, if you get injured, it's over.
Contract. Yeah. So the only money that's guaranteed on a rookie contract is a signing bonus. First rounders contracts are fully guaranteed. So a first rounder in NFL signs a rookie contract, his signing bonus guaranteed, and then his whole rookie contract through years 1 through 4. Second rounders, they typically have about 2 or 3 years guaranteed. Beyond at the 3rd round level and 3rd through 7th and free agent, the only thing that's guaranteed is a signing bonus. Veteran contracts, that is, there's more negotiation. Usually the signing bonus is guaranteed, plus back years are guaranteed as well. If you look at Deshaun Watson, he got a fully guaranteed contract. He has not played football in the last 2 years, but he's still getting played just like he's playing. Kirk Cousins from Atlanta, fully guaranteed contract, because that's the power of it. That's what football wants, because the players want that and union wants that, because that's where basketball is. That's where baseball is. On a business side, if you have the leverage as a player to get a guaranteed contract, get one. But most journeymen, no. Your only thing guaranteed is your signing bonus.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. And some of the other sports is a little bit different, but more to exactly what you've outlined there. You're consulting now as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing today. Now we're going to kind of go take some steps backwards, but tell us what you're doing today as a consultant.
Well, I coached high school and college, and in 2023, my son Josh was going to the NFL. Caleb, my son, he was a high school All-American. He was going to college. So I was trying to figure out, if I do come back home and leave my college coaching position, what would I do? I came back and started working with a Born to Compete, which is a recruiting service or a media service that ranks and evaluates high school and youth athletes. So like the ESPN for youth sports. And they hired me to rank players around the nation. And so that's what I did. I ranked and evaluated players and teams, but I also consulted with elite players. So if a parent had a kid that was a 3 or 4 or 5-star, I would consult with them on their recruiting, deciding what colleges to go to, what camps to attend, what position to play, and what they needed to do development-wise. And that has sort of led to where I am now. When I was working with Born to Compete, I was helping my sons Josh and Caleb navigate college and NFL. Other parents that had kids on their teams, whether college or pro, would ask me what did they need to do now, whether that was hiring a financial advisor, hiring a tax attorney, forming an LLC, where to work out for the combine, did they need to buy Lloyd's of London insurance, how to negotiate their collective NIL deals, and who would they choose for an agent. And I began setting up, let's say I would have a parent come to me about their child, and I would consult. And I said, all right, I got 3 options for you as an agent. I'm going to pass on the contact, connect you with them. Or I'm going to pass on a financial advisor. It's up to you to choose. I have 3 I think are credible. Here they are. Same thing with tax attorney. So that's what I started with doing with Born to Compete, but I also kept doing that on my own with Gary Downs Consulting. And recently I've signed on with Excel Sports Management. For about 6-7 months, been working with them, working exclusively with their athletes.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Very interesting. Take us back, Gary, back when you were playing in your early years and you started thinking about life after sports. You mentioned your excellent academic learning and so forth. When did you start thinking about life after sports?
When I was in high school, one year I broke my wrist, and a young orthopedic surgeon came and picked me up, took me to the Houston Sports Clinic. And I mean, he was sort of cool, and he was a doctor, and he treated me. And I said, and that's the first experience I had really working with any professionals or meeting someone outside of being a teacher or my parents. My dad was in the military. My mom was a banker, but I met him, and he was a good mentor. And then years later, when I was playing for NC State, we played down in the Gator Bowl against Florida, and he was the attending physician. So my first thought was to be either a physical therapist or a doctor. As a matter of fact, I ended up going to NC State and majoring in pre-med. So even before leaving high school, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I entered NC State as a pre-med major, stayed in that major for 4 years. While I was there, other interests, theology, sociology came into play, where I took a lot of electives in those classes as well. But early on, the idea was to be a doctor. Interesting enough, that never matriculated. I did not become a doctor, but my daughter is at Wake Forest Medical School now in her 3rd year. So I began thinking about a career after football. While I was playing, I was with the Denver Broncos one year. I got cut, and during those several weeks when I was without a team, I was working out at a school in Clayton County, and I noticed a middle school football team practicing. I thought they were horrible. And after days watching them, I couldn't take it anymore. So I went over to the coach and asked him, I told him who I was. I told him I played college ball and pro ball, and I think I was in my 3rd year that year. And I asked him, could I help? He ended up agreeing. I ended up helping that middle school team. They made it to the championship that year. And then at the end of the season, I got back on with the Giants. So I went and finished the season with the Giants. But I knew at that point, when I finished playing ball, I was going to go coach. So that was one of those obstacles in life that created an opportunity.
Okay. What time frame did you get married?
So I met my wife, Tanya, my freshman year of college. We were coming out of a campus party, and I saw her. I remember exactly what she was wearing on that day. And then I saw her the next weekend, and I told my cousin I'm going to marry her. And I asked her out, and she invited me over to her parents' house, even though she lived on campus. She lived on campus, but in order to go on a date with her, I had to go pick her up over her parents' house and bring one of my friends along. So we had a double date. We've been married 29 years now. We're married on May 4th, 1996. So I got married right before I turned 24. So I guess that's pretty young for nowadays, but we got married, been married 29 years now.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm sure she played a big part in some of your life decisions as you move forward.
Absolutely, she did. My rookie year, I was drafted by the New York Giants, and I was trying to decide whether I was going to live in New York but she was in grad school at Georgia Tech. So even though we went to NC State, she went to grad school, majored in computer science, was getting a master's in computer science here at Georgia Tech. So I spent my off seasons here in Atlanta. And so that definitely did shape, and that sort of affected years later. After years when I was in 1996, I was a free agent. At the end of that season, I had a choice to sign with the New England Patriots, stay with the Giants, or come to Atlanta. My head coach, Dan Reeves, took the job here in Atlanta. And the fact that I owned a home here in Atlanta and my wife was here, it made it pretty easy to decide to come to sign with the Falcons.
Mm-hmm. How did you navigate through, after being a star in college and going to the pros and kind of going from team to team? How did you navigate? What kind of mindset helped you get through that period of time and remain positive?
Well, I remember one tough time. I was in Denver and I went through training camp and I got cut. But I decided, I was not going to get an apartment until after cuts. I made the team. The final cuts were made and I was on the team. A few days later, during the week of practice, I got a call from the general manager and said they needed to make a move. By that time, I got an apartment. I was so distraught. Matter of fact, I was flying back to Atlanta. I met my parents in the airport. They were on a flight to go to Denver for the first game. And I said, no need for you to fly out there because I'm here now. And my mom, at that time, I really did I said, I can't take this. Not knowing what's going to happen, injuries costing me my job, and ultimately someone else's injury on the team ended up costing me my job. And so my mother said, listen, whatever you want to do, if you want to keep playing, we'll support you. If you want to move on, we'll support you. And so I came home, and that's when I started working out. I kept working out at that school and ran into those kids and started helping coaching. And I think it put some things in perspective. It gave me an outlook beyond ball. And at that point, it changed. Like, I had nothing to lose. I had been cut, dismissed, rejected. And at that point, I said, well, I want to play ball, but it sort of relieved a lot of pressure because I already been cut. And it's like, I lost the career, so I had nothing to lose. It sort of freed me. And when I went back on the field, the apprehensions, worrying about someone looking, you know what, I already been on the street, so I really didn't worry. It did remove some of the stress. Sometimes people have fear of failure. Some people have fear of success, but being cut did put things in perspective. At that time, also in 96, 97 was when I got married. Me and my wife made a concerted, intentional effort to grow our faith. So as we got married, we got more involved in our spiritual development. We were going to World Changers back then, but basically we took a deep dive in our faith development and understanding that God's role in our lives, in every area of life, both in our marriage and our finances. And the faith element really helped me over the next few years, believing God was on my side and not against me.
Excellent. And as you started now growing your family, you have your first child. You have 3 children. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And how did you start molding their lives, you and your wife, molding their lives and moving forward in faith and also in being competitive and getting into sports and education?
Well, Cameron was born in 1998, right as we were going to the Super Bowl. So I played in the Super Bowl with the Falcons in that 98-99 season. She was born that year. As a young parent, there's no guidebook.
Right.
We don't know everything. And so I was still learning how to be a husband, still trying to make it in the NFL. I was thinking year 5 then. And so at that point, she's a baby and I'm thinking I've got to provide for her. But what kept growing was our faith. We were babies in Christ. Even when you confess Christ, you're not mature in that moment. And her name is Cameron, but I could see what was happening, the growth that I was making. So by the time we had our next child, Joshua, our sons Joshua and Caleb were named after the Joshua and Caleb in the Bible. And you think that to make that transition, the fact is I named my children after those Hebrew names because that's how faith was becoming more and more relevant in our household. While that was going on, I went to NFL Europe one time, and I know we haven't talked about coaching, but I was coaching in NFL Europe in 2007. When I came back home, my wife said, I signed us up to be Sunday school teachers. So I knew what happened. She signed me up to be the Sunday school teacher. And so I ended up being my children's Sunday school teacher. So I taught Cameron, Joshua, and Caleb in Sunday school. And so I ended up baptizing Cameron and Joshua during that class. Caleb was too young, but to the fact that I was involved in their faith development as their Sunday school teacher, as well as teaching them at home. And then as well, sports-wise, I mean, Cameron, she played soccer. My wife was one of her soccer coaches. And so I ended up coaching a little bit for her in soccer, but I coached track and I coached Caleb and Josh in their sports. But initially, I did not start raising them with the idea, oh, they're great athletes. They're going to be great athletes. The whole goal was to raise up a godly seed. The goal was to raise up people of character and let them be excellent at whatever their calling or vocation was. It was not, one time Cameron was in gymnastics, like tumbling for a 4 or 5 year old. And her instructor, I was just dropping her off. Her instructor said, she's a really good athlete. And I remember thinking, she is? I don't know what a really good 5-year-old athlete looks like. And I don't know what a really good girl athlete looks like. And that's the first time I ever thought about her being athletic. And I think that's same thing with Josh and Caleb. I think when Josh was little, I never thought of him as an athlete, but I saw he played rec basketball. And I remember him making a steal right before halftime. And I said, wait a minute, this guy might be an athlete. He might be a baller. Now, Caleb was a little different. I think we learned Caleb right off at 2-3 years old. He was an athlete because he was doing what the others were doing. He saw the other kids. He could mimic his brother. He was at their practices. So I knew early on that he was an athlete.
Did you have your children play up an age, or did you have them playing at their level? One. Secondly, did you let them choose which sport that they participated in, or did you just kind of guide them based off of what you were seeing?
I would say we initially let them play what they wanted to play, but we guided them later. So all of them played soccer initially. Cameron played soccer. Josh played soccer. But with, like we said, hey, Cam, you should play basketball too. So she played basketball and soccer, but soccer was her main thing. She played soccer in college as well. And she was a ODP, Olympic development level player as a youth. She also, when she played basketball, that was sort of like us encouraging her to do something different. But likewise, she took piano lessons, took violin lessons, and she took dance lessons. Those are all part of her development skills. Just like you, she was really good at math. And so we encourage that. Josh and Caleb, Josh started in soccer and baseball. He was very good. To this day, his mother, Tanya, she wished that he had kept playing baseball. He had a draft rating. He played in the perfect game as a 12, 13-year-old. Caleb played in the Little League World Series, and so they all play sports, but over time, you would assess and look at what they do well, look at their body build, look at their coordination, and think, you know what? I think they could be really good at that. Obviously, work ethic and practice, they matter and they develop persons, but I think the ability to recognize and discern hidden or underlying talent or equipment. Is this child equipped to do certain things? It's like recognizing your child has aptitude for music and say, okay, let's put him in music lessons, or aptitude for math. Same thing at Joshua. I remember seeing him at field day when he was 4 or 5 in preschool, and all the kids had to shoot free throws. He knocked down every free throw. I didn't see another kid hit a free throw. So I said, well, he is coordinated, and maybe he's play basketball. Well, later on, as he was playing basketball, he said, I ruined his career. He couldn't shoot that well. I said, well, listen, at 5'9" or 10, if you can't shoot, you can't make it in the NBA or college. So in my mind, that's not the sport. And I tell people this. I say, listen, if you're going to take an animal and put it in a certain activity, which animal would you teach how to swim? Would you teach a fish to swim or a bird? You teach a fish. And if you were going to teach an animal how to fly, would you teach a fish or a bird? You teach the bird because the bird's built for that. So some of it is recognizing how equipped the kid is. Are they coordinated? Do they have great endurance? Are they strong? Are they tall? It requires a little bit of insight to see it, but if you can see it, you can help, and you can help steer kids in the direction where they might have more success because they're equipped to.
Mm-hmm. So, Gary, when did your enthusiasm that you radiate, when did you recognize that you had that inner skill and that you could communicate and touch other athletes, other people from a leadership and motivational standpoint?
I think I learned it from my father when my father took me to the field to practice baseball. He'd taken those bags of balls and we practiced hitting and fielding and grounding and pitching. And we were doing that work. I don't know what the other kids and their families were doing when we were out there, but I know we did that in Germany. We did that in Washington. We did that in North Carolina when we go visit. And so we would go on vacation, and my dad had buckets of balls, and we would practice. And he was a military guy, but I don't know where he learned it from. Maybe he learned the repetition from something they did in the military, but that's how he brought me up. And so my younger brother, I have a younger brother, and he's coached at Georgia and Georgia Southern. He's a high school coach at New Manchester High School. He's 12 years younger than me. So I had the opportunity to help him. So as he was growing up, I would help him. I would sign him up for track clinics and those things. And then, of course, the year in 1996, when I was released from the Broncos, when I got to coach over at North Clayton Middle School, I got a DJ Shockley, who ended up playing at Georgia, playing in NFL for the Falcons. I coached that team. And that was the first time I got to coach in an organized fashion. And what happened was, there were some kids out there that I looked at, and I didn't think they were very good. And I remember watching one kid, and I said, man, this kid needs to choose another sport. Like, he's not going anywhere in football.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 years later, that guy signed a Division I scholarship at Auburn University. So I learned you don't want to disqualify a kid at 13, 14 years old because you don't know how they're going to develop after puberty, because that puberty period matters a lot. But I just saw that, and DJ, his dad is Don. I look back at those years and not saying that I had a tremendous role in his development, but to see him at 12, 13 years old, and then to see him as a grown man, I remember seeing him at Best Buy. I was retired, and he had just signed with the Falcons. I just thought, man, I sowed a seed in that young man's life. And he remembered me, his dad remembered me, because I was a pro football player out there helping those high school kids. And I think that just ability to impact their future. And for me, I look back at my coaches. I had a really good coach in college, Dick Portee. He was an African-American running back coach where he had a Division I job at NC State and Maryland back when there were very few African-American Division I coaches. And I look back at my high school track coach, Greg Hart, the amount of time and energy he put into us as athletes, but also as young men. I mean, we were fixing the track with just our labor. We didn't have the money. And he had us out there preparing and fixing that field. He was also sharing the gospel. I remember riding to the state track meet, and he was playing spiritual tapes. And I mean, we knew what he was doing, but I can remember him sowing those seeds. So I had some good coaches sow into my life, as well as my head coach in college, Michael Kane. Years later, when I wanted to coach college ball, I called Coach O'Kane, and Coach O'Kane gave me my first college job. So I look back at my mentors, and that made me want to be a mentor myself.
Mm-hmm. So, Gary, how much do you think that faith played in your athletic career and even your marriage? How much did faith play in that? And what would you say to those out in the audience today that are looking at their kids and trying to understand what helps make a guy grow in their faith?
Well, first of all, when I first got married, before I got married, I knew who I was before. And I knew my natural proclivities. And I wanted my marriage to succeed. And I said, man, there's no way that it's going to work if it's just me, because she's going to do something and I'm going to do something and it's going to be over. And I said, Lord, I need some help. And so that was really a part of my impetus to ask God for help. And I said, because there's no way I could do this, just me and her. And so that was that was my first motivation to do that. And I've been married 29 years. My parents their 54th wedding anniversary is today. And I just know I saw them and I've seen them grow as people. I've seen my father grow in his faith. But as far as the children, Genesis 18:19. In Genesis 18:19, the Lord speaking to Abraham, and the Lord said, Abraham, I charge you with bringing up your sons and their household in the way of the Lord to follow righteousness and justice. Years ago, when I had children, I took that charge, that it being my job as a father to bring my children up into the faith. As well, when you talk about faith in game, I definitely had a theory, a philosophy that all great athletes have to have a level of faith. We might call it confidence, but they have to have a level of faith in themselves. And so I was on a mission to figure this thing out. And I found out when I was more confident, I played better. But some people don't have a lot of natural confidence. So some of my confidence did not come from just experiences. It came from the promises of God, believing that God was with me and for me. And so my children have seen that. And I talked to an agent recently, and he said, this is what he said to me. He said, your sons, Josh and Caleb, they have a level of confidence in their abilities because you have an unbelievable level of confidence in what they can achieve. What I believe they can achieve is not based solely on their athletic ability. I believe in the favor of God. I believe God has favored them and anointed them to do what they do. And when you're trying to succeed in sports and ball and business, you need some things to bounce in your way. People might call them luck. I call them favor. And I'm asking God to have favor. Years ago, the Lord showed me and my wife in a vision that when our children come home, we're to lay our hands on them and bless them. Now, we've been doing that for 10, 15 years now. So when our children come home, literally, they're grown. But before they leave, they lower their head. We put our hands on their head and we'll pray, Lord, take out the head and not the tail, above and not beneath, blessed going in and blessed going out. And we ask the Lord to have mercy and grace on our children. And so our kids grew up in that household. And I tell you what, being drafted, I was the 98th pick in the 1994 NFL draft. When I was a freshman in college, I started. I did not start for 2 more years. Like, I didn't start my sophomore year in college. I didn't start my junior year in college. Another back played in front of me. He did not get drafted, but he went to a team and he came back. He got cut. He said, Downs, you can make it. You have exactly what they're looking for. I look back and thinking, like, of all those players, all those running backs, how did I get drafted? I was good. I had solid stats, but there are a lot of great players that never make it. A lot of great athletes don't make it out of high school. I've had teammates not make it out of high school and definitely not make it out of college. So I do look at it as just a gift of God to make it. And then I played 7 years. In 7 years of football, I mostly played special teams. I did not score a single touchdown in 7 years because I really didn't get a chance to. But just like, how did I make it 7 years? So literally, it's like I can look back and say, well, it wasn't fair. They didn't give me the ball. My second year in the NFL, I played in the backfield with Rodney Hampton, Herschel Walker, and Tyrone Wheatley, all first rounders. And of course, Herschel the Heisman. Like, what are the chances? That caused me to get released. But I looked and said, you know what? I'm not going to complain about it. I believe being there, getting that opportunity to be in that league 7 years, that was a blessing of God. I do believe that. And my children's success, I believe, yes, there's some work in it. There's some labor in it. It's intentional labors up by me and my wife. At the same time, we believe in the favor of God, opening doors and opportunities on our life.
Good there. And I'm sure you believe and understand that there's always a place on a team for a good, solid person, good character, and that is going to be a galvanizing person on the team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I was looking at Nick Saban. Nick Saban said, when the teams recruit you in the NFL and they're evaluating, they're looking for butts. You want to be a guy who says, and he can do this and he can do that, not buts. Mm-hmm. And so that's the character. So when I was raising my children, I would say, listen, your talent can take you places that your character can't sustain you. And I had one of my best football players I've ever coached, one of the most talented players. He failed. And I felt like I failed him because his character let him down. And so I was determined that my children's character was going to be here. Yes, I want their skill level to be here, but I want their character to be there as well, because I think their character, their godliness, because you do have people that believe in God and have faith, but they don't have character. But it says add to your faith this, and I believe you add to your faith that character. I believe God calls us to walk righteously and to be good, right? And so I played on teams that I was the special team guy. I was a teamer. My first coaching job in high school, they went back and called the Falcons. I was coaching at Riverside Military Academy, and they called the Falcons. And they said, what do you all have to say about Gary Downs? And they said, he is a team player. That's what his name's James Benson. He's a retired colonel in the military, but that's what he said. They told him Downs is a team player. And I was a team player. I mean, I would do what's best for the team. Now, did I want to be blessed? Yes, but I would do what's best for the team. And even now, when I have conversations with my former teammates with the Falcons, that's 25 years ago that we played ball, 27 years ago. And some of them said, Downs, you know what? You were always consistent as a person. Like then when they're in their 20s, they didn't understand that. And I didn't think they were looking at that. But now we're in our 50s and they said, Downs, we saw who you were then and we see who you are now. And you're the same guy. You were that guy then. And they respect that now. And it's like, I didn't necessarily think, I thought, man, I'm a low man on a totem pole. But in their mind, they're watching me. I was watching them, but they were watching me. And they've seen my story. They know my kids. And they said, man, we've seen you. And I have former players of mine. Some of them, they're grown now. The guys I coached in high school and guys I coached in college, when they see my children, they say, Coach, we're not surprised. We know what you poured into us. And we know what you were doing with your kids, and we're not at all surprised by their level of success.
Mm-hmm. Gary, if you had to look back, and I'm asking you to look back, is there a story that you can share with the audience of an obstacle, one of your bigger obstacles that you were able to turn around? And you've already indicated you have strong faith, but there was something that helped you turn that around and make you who you are today?
One of the greatest obstacles I faced is I always wanted to coach college or pro. And I decided when I left the NFL as a player, I was going to coach high school in order to be home with my family, to be home with my wife and kids. In 2007, after coaching high school about 4 or 5 years, I went and coached at NFL Europe. And I mean, I was going to plan to coach at NFL. When I came back home, I had a choice to go coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Pisgah Patriots. I ended up deciding to take the high school job because I did not think that Josh, who was my oldest son, he was 5. I didn't think it went well with him while I was gone. So I made that difficult decision to go coach high school. And I committed to doing that. But in 2014, I was burnt out from coaching high school. I wanted to pursue my ambition, and I had to make a choice. And I wanted to go coach college. And the Lord said to me, He said, let them stay. Don't worry about the rest. So the Lord sort of gave me permission to go pursue that coaching career. And so for the next 8 years, I pursued a college coaching career, and I did very well. Our teams did well, but I was missing time with my family. My kids were getting older. Josh was in high school, Cameron was in high school. And so I had to make a choice at some point. If I stay in coaching college, I'm going to miss so much. And so in 2023, I made the tough decision to leave my college coaching career and trust God that He was going to be able to provide for me and the family so I can be here for my children. At the time, Josh was going to the NFL or trying to navigate the NFL. Caleb was leaving high school, going to Alabama, and my daughter was in a sort of gap year for med school. And that's all the things that I'd done prior. I didn't know that I was sowing seeds. My first job that I got when I came back home was with a group called Born to Compete. 12 years earlier, Caleb had won an award with Born to Compete. And that company ended up hiring me to come back and recruit and being a consultant with them. After that, FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, I called them. I did some FCA work in college and in high school, and I let them know I was coming back to the Georgia area. And I said, do y'all need help? The Lord had put it on me. He said, how about FCA? So I called them. What's interesting is the guy who was the director of the county said, I'm no longer the director of the county. And I said, well, what are you? He said, I'm the state director. And I said, you're the state director? He said, and I said, where do you need help? He said, Gwinnett County. And I said, where? He said, we don't have anybody in the county. We need somebody. So I volunteered, became a full-time staff member in Gwinnett County. But the same schools that I used to recruit as a college coach, those are the same schools I went back to become an FCA chaplain. I mean, matter of fact, I work at Collins Hill a lot. My wife's former assistant principal is the principal there. So I look at all those things that I was doing, coaching, all those skills that I developed, what you call emotional intelligence, the social skills, the network I built there has come back and benefited me now that I'm able to provide for my family, do some things I love, to still mentor young people, to share the gospel, but I'm also able to help my sons in their journey. And my willingness to help my sons, which is fun, but then also the ability to help others. I mean, I'm telling you, I coached 8 years. I've been away from 8 years to leave a job that was solid and then to take a leap of faith to come home. And when I had no job, and I look back and I just say, why was I fearful? But the Lord did confirm that that's what I was supposed to do. When he said, matter of fact, when I was leaving East Tennessee State, he told me, he said, it's time for you there's nothing left for you to do here. And your wife is ready for you to come back home. And I just sort of took him at his word, like sort of Abraham took him at his word and come back. And like I said, I'm almost laughing at myself at how fearful I was at leaving coaching. Now, understand, I've been coaching for 20 years. To walk away from coaching, and people say, what you going to do? And people always ask now, do you miss it? Do you want to go back? As a matter of fact, I interviewed with the San Diego Chargers about 2 years ago. In the neighborhood, I was like I was out of coaching for a year, and I was employed. And I remember doing that interview, and I never thought about going back, but I thought about that. And I said, I interviewed with the Chargers, but getting to work with Excel Sports Management as a consultant to athletes and athlete advisor, getting to work with high school athletes, speak to men's group about faith, about the mysteries of God. I could not have imagined a better scenario, but the fear I had of walking away from the known. And sometimes you have to walk away from the known to imagine what God has for you.
Excellent. Excellent. Gary, as we start to wrap up here, is there anything you want to say to the audience, how they may reach out to you, how they may contact you, may follow your story?
They can reach me on Instagram at Coach Downs _Gary or Twitter. And if they got a young person that is going through an athletic experience at college level or high school and they want some advice, if they have a pro athlete or kid aspiring pro, if they need representation, listen, I love to represent them. If there's a right fit, if we're not a right fit, I can recommend people and consult and point in the right direction. I love helping people. That's the greatest job in this world. It's like Zig Ziglar said, if you help enough other people to get to where they want, you'll get what you want in life. And I just thank God that he's allowed me to be helpful and allowed me these experiences with him to share faith, the opportunities he's bestowed upon my family, and to be a light for other families.
Well, Gary, I tell you what, I've really enjoyed speaking with you today on the podcast. I thank you for your leadership and how you're working with young people in the communities around the country. And as a family man, how you pulled your family together and held them together with faith. And it serves as a true example for a lot of folks out there. We're live, as you know, online. And excuse me, there's a lot of comments flowing in the box, but I as a true kingmaker, I want to thank you and appreciate you taking the time out to be on our program today. And for the audience, this is Catch as Catch Can, where we're turning obstacles to opportunities. And you just heard from Gary Downs, who has just done a tremendous job. And I congratulate you, Gary, on what you've done. And then to your audience out there, be sure to tune in to Catch as Catch Can as we have these podcasts ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
This has been Catch as Catch Can. The game isn't over. Your success story is just getting started. Head to tinsleyspeaks.com for exclusive content, resources, and opportunities. Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., a production of Live Stream Editors.